Okay. Well, last time we continued with this shortest of all divisions in the NTCF called Kundalini and the Spine, which focuses on, I think it's like 6 or 7 pages. It focuses on the 3 triangles of matter, and he goes out of his way to emphasize that it's just about the matter aspect. The latent fire at the base of the spine, the pranic or radiatory fire, and the fire produced by circulation through 3 head centers. Actually, we've been talking about this for a number of webinars, even before we came to this division. The merging of these triangles, DK tells us, must be consciously directed by the mind, which only becomes possible after lifetimes of purification. DK then tells us that in its final stages, the rising of the Kundalini redeems the matter aspect, reuniting it, we're told, with its quote-unquote Father in heaven, the third logos. Then we learn that the path of circulation around and between the triangles, which DK calls the form of its progression, is dependent on the ray makeup of the disciple. Last time this led to a discussion on the hypothetically available paths around and between the 3 triangles. I think Robert brought up the fact that it's not necessarily that these triangles may very much be turning on themselves, and so it's not just the paths shown here, that there may be 4th dimensional paths that we couldn't even conceive of. Then we considered the idea that, quote, the blending of the fire with pranic fire and their subsequent united progression are things of the past with many. And fortunately for the race, the work was achieved without conscious effort. This is a really important point in giving us more insight into this whole Kundalini process. DK then turns his focus to the triangle in the head, whose activation requires movement of energy up the Pingala or solar channel. He brought up before that the earlier stages, which have to do with the lower chakras, are brought into activity through the Ida or Ida, but the triangles in the head require the activity of this second or solar channel called the Pingala. And he also pointed out that the final merging of all 3 triangles, as the triangles of matter and of the 2 triangles of matter and that of the head, takes place only when the central Sushumna channel becomes active. Then in the text, DK again issues a warning about the dangers of prematurely arousing the Kundalini fires, asserting that the only safe path lies through soul contact. Quote, and this is one of 2 very lofty sentences at the end of this short division. Only when Buddhi has assumed an ever-increasing control of the personality via the mental plane, hence the need of building the Antaskarana, will the personality respond to that which is above, and the lower fires mount and blend with the 2 higher. So this very much associates the rising of the Kundalini with the building of the Antakarana. We then moved into Division E, entitled Motion on the Physical and Astral Planes, where we will be for quite some time. And this takes us up to where we left off. We got into this paragraph a bit, but I'd like to start by rereading this first paragraph from the section entitled Preliminary Remarks. So let's start off. Could we get a reader, please?
And Veronica.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Could you read, please?
Yes. I would point out primarily and emphasis the fact that the motion we are considered is that due to the fire latent in the matter itself, a motion that is the prime characteristic and basic quality of the primordial ray of active intelligence. To express it otherwise, it is the outstanding faculty of the third logos of Brahma, viewed as the creator, and this faculty is the product or result of an earlier manifestation. Each of these three logoi, when in manifestation and thus personified, is exemplifying some one quality which predominates over the others. Each more or less exemplifies all, but each demonstrates one of the three aspects so profoundly as to be recognized as that aspect itself. In much the same way, for instance, the different incarnating jivas carry vibration, which is their main measure, though they may also have lesser vibrations that are subsidiary to them. Let us get this clear, for the truth embodied is fundamental.
Thank you, Anne Veronica. So first up, I would point out primarily and emphasize the fact that the motion we are considering is that due to the fire latent in matter itself. Notice the cause and effect there. A motion that is the prime characteristic and basic quality of the primordial ray of active intelligence. So going all the way back to the beginning, HPB tells us that motion is the single and fundamental aspect or quality, the one single fundamental quality of the one life, and thus, by extension, is an aspect of all three logi that represent deity in the solar system. So could we get a reader for this short quote from The Secret Doctrine?
Andrew, do you want to read?
Yes. Its one absolute attribute, which is itself eternal, ceaseless motion, is called in esoteric parlance the great breath, which is the perpetual motion of the universe in the sense of limitless, ever-present space. That which is motionless cannot be divine. But then there is nothing, in fact, and reality absolutely motionless within the universal soul.
Thank you, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
So, motion inherent in the one life is also fundamental to all aspects of manifestation. The motion of the third universal principle, governed by the primordial ray of active intelligence, is rotary motion, which is brought into manifestation through the fire latent in matter itself. It is characterized by three qualities: inertia and mobility, polar opposites, which eventually lead to rhythm. You can also see this in terms of rajas and tamas and sattva. We looked at that. At one point, we looked at those three. Okay, and next, to express it otherwise, it is the outstanding faculty of the third logos of Brahma, viewed as the creator. And this faculty is the product of or result of an earlier manifestation. Okay, so he's focusing in on this third logos in its role as creator. That earlier manifestation is the first solar system, during which time the third logoic aspect, Brahma, the latent intelligence in matter, was developed. Could we get a reader for this quote from a little later in TCF?
The third aspect, or Brahma aspect, of the activities of those entities who are his expression is characterized by that method in the in the distribution of matter, which we call the law of economy. It is the law governing the scattering of the atoms of matter and their dissociation from one another, wide distribution, vibratory rhythm, heterogeneity and quality, and their inherent rotary action. This law of economy causes matter always to follow the line of the least resistance, and is the basis of the separative action of atomic matter. It governs matter, the opposite pole of spirit.
Thank you. We're going to be talking a lot about this law in some upcoming text. Okay, so next, each of the three logoi, when in manifestation and thus personified, is exemplifying some one quality which predominates over the others. This is a very interesting statement. Each more or less exemplifies all, but each demonstrates one of these three aspects so profoundly as to be recognized as that aspect itself. So when a logos is in manifestation, it is considered personified. Personification is expressed through an aggregation of lower vehicles, which allows a logos to manifest its whatever inherent quality. Note that in addition to their primary expression, will, love, wisdom, and intelligent activity, each of the three logoi also carry the qualities of the other two. This is an important point. We tend to think of the logoi as characterized by only the one quality for which they are recognized. But here we discover that each, in some measure, carries the qualities of the other two. And he goes into this a bit later and how these qualities intermix. Next, in much the same way, for instance, the different incarnating jivas carry a vibration which is their main measure, though they may also have lesser vibrations that are subsidiary to them. Let us get this clear, for the truth embodied is fundamental. So let's take a look at MDR's commentary on this passage. Can we get a reader, please?
Jen, do you want to read?
What is a reincarnating jiva? A jiva is a prodigal son setting forth on pilgrimage, which will take him into 5 Brahmic planes of vibration on the cosmic physical planes: atmic, buddhic, monastic, astral, and etheric physical. Having pervaded the entire universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. The monad remains, though its emanation, the jiva, goes forth. When DK speaks of the lesser vibrations, which are of the possession of the jiva, it is another way of saying that each of us, as jivas, has all the rays and all the various astrological qualities, though in differing proportions. We are discussing a holographic principle. The whole is reflected in each part, though the proportion of the aspect of the whole, which are reflected, varies. Good comment.
Yeah, I know. We miss you, Michael. Thank you. Any thoughts or questions? Okay. Next up, could we Get a reader, please.
Joe. The threefold goal. 2, the threefold function. 3, the threefold mode of activity. The third logos. The third logos, or Brahma, is characterized by active intelligence. His mode of action is that which we call rotary, or that measured revolution of the matter of the system. First, as a grand totality, setting in movement the material circumscribed by the entire ring pass knot. And secondly, differentiating it according to 7 vibratory rates or measures into the 7 planes. On each of these planes, the process is pursued, and the matter of any plane within the plane ring pass knot shows first as a totality and then as a 7-fold differentiation. This differentiation of matter is brought about by rotary motion and is controlled by the law of economy, one of the cosmic laws, with which we will deal later, only pausing here to say that this law of economy might be considered as the controlling factor in the life of the third logos.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. First up, 1, the threefold goal. 2, the threefold function. 3, the threefold mode of activity. You may have noticed that these are the title headings listed at left under the chapter heading Preliminary Remarks. These all apply to all 3 logoi, which DK will now sequentially introduce, beginning with the third. The third logos, or Brahma, is characterized by active intelligence. His mode of action is that which we call rotary, or that measured revolution of the matter of the system. First, as a grand totality, setting in movement the material circumscribed by the entire ring pass knot, and secondly, differentiating it according to 7 vibratory rates or measures into the 7 planes. Here DK reveals a bit more about the nature of rotary motion, which demonstrates as both a unified and a septenary expression, and which differentiates as, quote, 7 vibratory rates or measures on the 7 planes. This suggests that the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane are the outer manifestation of this septenary rotary motion. And these 7 rates or measures of motion, one each for the 7 planes. It's important to note that these planes, rather than being vertically stacked as shown here, are actually spheroidal. We're told later in TCF that they rotate horizontally in relation to the rays, which also form a sphere that rotate vertically. Next, on each of these, by the way, you can always, anytime, interrupt me, raise your hand. If you have a comment or a question, please feel free. It's much more interesting to have a discussion than just have me lecture to you. So, I ask and I receive. I see hands.
Yeah, Andrew.
I just want to make sure we're talking about cosmic logoi here. Is that correct?
We're talking about well, they are cosmic. They're the 3. This is an interesting question, actually, because MDR spins a theory that they are independent of our solar logos. But the usual perspective is that they are the three aspects of our solar logos. The third aspect representing our solar system in its externality, you could say.
Right, right.
And the second aspect, which is allied with the heart of the sun, which is responsible for the demonstration of consciousness. And then the first aspect, pure spirit, the central
Right.
spiritual sun. So yes, they are cosmic in that sense, but the way they're talked about in TCF is mainly in relation, or maybe wholly in relation to their effect within our solar system.
Okay, okay. So as you're reading this, you're viewing this as a discussion of the effects of these logos within our solar system and how they inform us. Okay. I wasn't quite sure what scale we were operating
Yeah,
at. So
exactly.
great. That's
Yeah,
very
good
helpful.
question. Yeah, and almost certainly, the as above, so below principle would extend the influence in other systems to other systems, I should say, where similar unfolding of these three logoi would take place.
Right.
But
Right.
DK tends to be very conservative in terms of any type of extending of comments that extend the influence, into cosmic regions. I mean, he does talk about the seven solar systems, of which ours is one, and he talks about the one about whom not may be said, but and about of course, the three greater constellations as well as our zodiacal constellations. But that's in certain stars. But mostly, it's even when he discusses them, it's almost always in relation to their influence on our solar system. And so it is with these three logoi.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Thank you.
You bet. Anyone else? I saw a couple more hands.
Yeah, Janet. Oh,
Hi, I was just wondering, has anyone started to work on a drawing of what you just described with the spherical planes and going perpendicular by any chance?
Well, this is this would be a great project. It'd probably be better as an animation, because what you have, the two septenaries that you would have are the horizontal, what does he call it here? It's a very particular term that I liked a lot. Rates of or measures, vibratory rates or measures, right? So that's what distinguishes each of the seven planes on which they manifest, right? So you'd have one sphere rotating that you could imagine would have a from top to bottom these seven vibratory rates or measure, but we can't even say that it would be from top to bottom. Maybe it's from within to the without, that closest to the core. I mean, if we're going to hold to the sphere analogy, then it would be that which is closest to the core would be, that uddy plane, maybe even the point at the center. And then they would be, in fact, as I consider this, I would think this is the more likely, and that which is at the surface of this sphere would represent the seventh or physical subplane, right? And then you would have that rotating in this other sphere, which is the sphere of the rays, which might also have a ray 1 at the closest to the core moving out to ray 7, but not necessarily. It's because you have to remember too that each of these planes has 6 subplanes, which have a characteristic. So they're like subrays and sub-qualities. Do I have that? See, yeah, here we go. Right. So, you have the 7 fundamentals, which would be that quality within the sphere, but each layer of that sphere would be, you would have these sub-qualities demonstrating. And then that would rotate east to west as the ray sphere rotates north to south, therefore ensuring, one might say, of the kind of blending that would provide absolutely every combination of the matter aspect or the vibratory rates and the ray aspect. It would be like and together they truly are one. And this is that, revealed to us by decay, the method of manifestation, but also the method of influence for one who's traveling from the surface of that sphere in the outer form world to the interior of that sphere, right? More hands? And yeah, in terms of the art of it, well, that would be quite a project, wouldn't it? I think Dwayne Carpenter is probably the best qualified among, the Moray Federation people to take on such a project. I'm sure he's thought of it, but it would be prodigious. I mean, there's a lot of obvious design and pictorial difficulties that just present themselves immediately. How do you distinguish the qualities of this rotation? Anyway, next question.
Yeah, Hulda.
Mute, yes. Hi, Francis.
Hi.
I'm new to this. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm new to this. I have been reading the books, but there are things that are confusing to me. Could you go back to your the text? I want to ask
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hang on.
So we are talking on a cosmic level now, and we are talking about the rotary motion. But I don't understand movement, the material circumscribed by the entire ring pass knot. We have a ring pass knot on a cosmic level and also on the micro level, macro, micro. And
Right.
then I'm thinking about this, the physical plane, emotional plane. Are there ring pass knot on each and every plane? I'm trying to understand how this motion, rotary motion, is going through the planes and how it affects us,
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, the law of economy, one of the sub laws of the law of economy is the law of repulsion, which is that law which allows the integrity, to say it one way, the distinctive quality of each plane to hold to itself, right? So that they don't interblend, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
once, first of all, you have the entire ring pass knot of the entire solar system, which demonstrates as a unified expression, a unified field, right? A unified vibratory rate. That breaks into, during manifestation, which is this gradual plunging into form, and it's described in the stanzas in the beginning of a treatise on cosmic fire, especially stanza 2 is particularly descriptive of this process. Each plane comes into form. In other words, that vibratory rate is established as this descent, this involutional descent by spirit into matter takes place. And so eventually all 7 planes are established, right? Allowing for dense physical incarnation. So each plane is its own ring pass knot, which is self protecting from that is to say, it naturally repels the matter from the other planes, right? That's due to the law of repulsion. And I have no idea if I answered your question.
Yeah, I think I have a little clearer. Yes, this ring pass knot has always confused me when I have been reading the books.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
it's best to think of any ring pass knot as more a ring of influence by the indwelling jiva, right? So at this point, our ring pass knot includes our physical, astral, and lower mental, and we're working to extend it in towards its potential of including the higher mental, right? And each planet has its vibratory ring pass knot, and the whole solar system, which includes all the ring pass knots of all the lives within this solar system, is also a unified ring pass knot, and its influence ends at a certain point as well. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Francis.
Okay, yeah. Anyone else?
Robert.
Hey, Robert.
Hi. I think what might be confusing here is I don't think any of this has to do with the cosmic logoi, who in the introductory postulates here are the three of those give rise to the countless universes and manifesting stars and solar systems. This, I think, is these, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are part of the description of our solar system. In all these other solar systems, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva may not even be part of the description. Page 38, he says here that the energy of Brahma, the third aspect of the logos. I think he's talking about the solar logos of this system. And
I agree.
so I don't think I don't think it's the impact of the cosmic logo on us, although everything is cosmic, obviously, but I think it makes it more confusing, but it could clarify just a focus on these being phenomena related to and entities or whatever, our solar system, our unique solar system.
Yeah, I think what you just said is correct. And at the same time, the quality of these logoi is proven to be present in other systems. For instance, he tells us that because just through ray quality, right, which are directly associated, right? You have, for instance, the ray 1 impact comes from the Great Bear, a particular star in the Great Bear, via certain constellations and Aries, and especially, and certain planets. So we know that there is a universality to these logoi. But I absolutely agree with you that in reference to the material we're talking about here, that it's, the focus is on their influence in this solar system.
I think you make a good point. And, in terms of the Great Bear, et cetera, which is described kind of as a will phenomenon in the broadest sense. Does he ever mention the Great Bear as being a Shiva type phenomenon? That would be interesting to know, or the Pleiades as a Brahma phenomenon, or is that the Indian names, are they kind of localized? So to speak?
Oh, well, that's a good question. And, I could fake it, but I think I better just say that I'm not sure. However, he really does interchange those three Hindu god names. He interchanges them with the with the aspects themselves, first aspect, Jivic principle, etc. But whether he specifically relates Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma to constellations beyond the solar system, I don't know. We'd have to do a word search. And
Yeah, I don't know either. And just for my bias, I like the idea that all these other systems of which he says they are countless universes, that maybe they don't all follow the exact same configuration, but I don't have the answer to that.
All right. Yeah. And he's very reticent to go beyond what he knows, in terms of just what you might call logical extension, without any experiential proof, or that which exists in the archives of the hierarchy, for instance. Okay, anyone else? Okay, let's go ahead. So on each of these planes, I think I said this, didn't I? On each of these planes, the process is pursued, and the matter of, I'm just got a window here, I gotta close. Okay, on each of these planes, the process is pursued, and the matter of any plane within the plane ring past not shows first as a totality. Oh, so we did this. Yeah, so the first or Adi plane of each of the 7 planes carries the essence or vibratory rate of the particular form of rotary motion that resonates through and is further differentiated by the 6 subplanes beneath it. Does that make sense? The same can be said for the entire Adi plane in relation to the 6 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. All of these, the key line here, or descriptive, is 7 vibratory rates or measures that distinguish these. So you can say that, each of these represents one of these 7 vibratory rates or measures. And that entrance into the next vibratory rate or measure is dependent on one's ability to align with that that vibratory rate, right? Through building the Antakarana, you align with the vibratory rate that links you with this triad through the monastic permanent atom. Okay. Finally, we've got the differentiation of matter is brought about by rotary motion and is controlled by the law of economy, one of the cosmic laws with which we will deal later, only pausing here to say that this law of economy might be considered as the controlling factor in the life of the third logos. So along with Fohat, rotary motion differentiates and separates while ever adhering to the law of economy, which governs the vehicles of all entities, from a solar logos to an atom of substance. The law of economy enforces separation and is thus the polar opposite of the law of attraction. To re-quote a passage we just read a minute ago, this law of economy causes matter always to follow the line of least resistance and is the basis of the separative action of atomic matter. Okay? Okay, next up. Can we get a reader, please?
Kirsten.
Therefore, his goal is the perfect blending of spirit and matter. B, his function is manipulation of prakriti or matter, so as to make it fit or equal to the demands and needs of the spirit. C, his mode of action is rotary, or by the revolution of matter to increase activity and thereby make the material more pliable. All these three concepts are governed by the law of economy, which is the law of adaptation in time and space, or the line of least resistance. This line of least resistance is that which is sought for and followed on the matter side of existence. Incidentally, Brahma manifests will because he is purpose, and love because in this solar system, love is the line of least resistance. While this is an occult statement worthy of consideration, yet it must be remembered that he is primarily activity and intelligence with the aim of adaptability, and that this is his main characteristic.
Okay, as you were reading, I realized that one thing that I wish I had pursued in describing this is the interrelation of these three qualities: the goal, the function, and the mode of action. What I'm noticing here is that they move from an orientation towards spirit. You could even almost ascribe them to the first, second, and third aspects, right? That you have a spirit orientation here, and then you have, it moves into matter in terms of manipulation, which is a key word of the third aspect, by the way, and the third ray is manipulative, not in the negative sense. But still, so as to make it fit or equal to, that is to say, appropriate to the needs of spirit. And then finally, we move into the very material aspect of this consideration, which is right. So just the interrelation of these three, I think, is important to keep in mind. I saw a hand go up.
Yeah, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is very nice differentiation of those 3 points, but it a little bit bewilders me as to this first. The goal is perfect blending of spirit and matter, and function is to make the matter fit for the demands and needs of the spirit. So I would turn it the other way around, that the goal is to make matter a tool for spirit, and function is blending them and differentiating them. But I don't know, perhaps I think wrongly, but little difficult to see this, that the goal is blending spirit and matter.
Well, I thought I said what you just said, and I agree with you that, yeah, gold tends to represent for me that you remember, because we're talking about the third aspect. So the goal of this third aspect is the perfect blending of spirit and matter. Anyway, thank you, Tom. So anyway, like I said, I didn't prepare notes for that comparison. It's really worth taking a closer look at. So anyway, first, therefore, his goal is the perfect blending of spirit and matter. This is not, at least initially, the blending of soul and personality, or eventually even monad and the vehicle. That takes place on the return path, but rather that involutional function performed by Fohat that draws spirit down into matter. The spirit aspect then becomes the indwelling jiva, or imprisoned soul. Next, B, his function is the manipulation of prakriti, or matter, so as to make it fit. It's actually, matter is in its nominal form. right? So as to make it fit or equal to the demands and needs of spirit. So through the second purpose, the third logos manipulates matter in such a way, including discarding aspects of it and drawing to itself new qualities in relation to the appropriateness or to the needs of the indwelling jiva. So I think it's esoteric psychology 2 that describes the 3 ways in which matter is drawn into the purpose of the indwelling jiva based on the 3 rays, which is through will, direct appropriation, and through, in the second ray, is this gradual conditioning through expansion until the matter that is at hand is reconditioned for the purposes, and then through manipulation, through which is third ray method of appropriating matter, it's specific selection. In other words, it doesn't condition the matter like the second ray does, but it selects the matter that is most appropriate, a very monastically oriented process, right? So that's, he even gets into this methods by which Prakriti is manipulated and is made fit for the demands of the indwelling spirit in another writing altogether. So anyway, could we get a reader for this, please?
And Magda, do you want to read?
Emanation, characteristic vibration, is the result of the blending of spirit and matter, and the relative adequacy of the matter or the form to the life within. The objective solar system or the sun in manifestation is the result of the blending of spirit, electric fire, with matter, fire by friction, and the emanations of the sun in time and space are dependent upon the adequacy of the matter and of the form to the life within.
So the purpose of this manipulation of the matter aspect is described here, right? Because the solar aspect, the sun aspect, is dependent upon the adequacy of the matter. So if the matter is too coarse, the sun cannot manifest. And of course, this is a gradual unfolding. So as that quality of soul becomes stronger, then the matter aspect is, you could say, reformulated. And we get some indication of that in the idea of, at the first initiation, you have 25% atomic substance matter. You all know this quote, right? At the second initiation, it's 50%. Third initiation, it's 75%. That very much speaks to this idea of this quality of matter, right? The making the matter equal to the demands of the spirit. Okay. All right. Next up, his mode of action is rotary, or by the revolution of matter to increase activity and thereby make the material more pliable. So the third logos, the third ray of active intelligence, and latent fire all stand in a causal relation to rotary motion, which in turn is responsible for the coherency and separation of the spheroidal forms of all entified units of consciousness. Two of the qualities of this motion are pliability and mutability, which allow for a continuous adjustment of the form aspect in relation to all other units of consciousness. The more pliable, the more changeable or mutable, then the more quickly, following the path of least resistance, the form adjusts to in relation to other units of consciousness and in relation to the spirit aspect within. Next up, all these three concepts are governed by the law of economy, which is the law of adaptation in time and space, or the line of least resistance. So we get a little bit of a definition there of what line of least resistance means. The law of adaptation in time and space, which follows the line of least resistance. This line of least resistance is that which is sought for and followed on the matter side of existence. So the intelligence aspect adapts by following the line of least resistance, thereby always using the minimum expenditure of energy necessary to accomplish its goal, which are carried out by mutability and pliability. Okay? Next up, incidentally, Brahma manifests will because he is purpose, and love because in this solar system, love is the line of least resistance. So this further explains DK's previous statement, quote, each logos more or less exemplifies all, but each demonstrates one of the three aspects so profoundly as to be recognized as that aspect itself. So one way Brahma, the third aspect, also manifests will is through its expression as the will to be, which is initiated on the third or Atmic plane, called the plane of the third logos, but whose quality is the will aspect of the spiritual triad. At the same time, the fact that the third logos is compelled to follow the line of least resistance aligns it with the love aspect, which is the line of least resistance in this solar system. An example of this comes through the fact that the third logos employs the Deva kingdom for its manipulation of matter. And for Devas, love is the path of least resistance. As DK says, in the case of the Devas, love is the fulfilling of the law without pain or sorrow. It is for them the line of least resistance, for they are the mother aspect, the feminine side of manifestation. And the easy path for them is to give, to nourish, and to tend. So you see here this inextricable connection between the third and second aspect manifest in the Deva kingdom, largely because this is the second solar system, and they are absolutely aligned with that, with the energy of the second logos in that way. But they demonstrate through and are subject to the laws of economy. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, next. While this is an occult statement worthy of consideration, yet it must be remembered that he, talking about the third logos, is primarily activity and intelligence with the aim of adaptability, and that this is his main characteristic, with the purpose of this adaptability being to make matter an appropriate and thus continuously updated vehicle for spirit. So I hope we're starting to get some sense of what's going on with this third logos in this second solar system. Can I see a hand?
Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, whenever he says something is a statement worthy of consideration, I always do my puny best to try to consider it. And here, what I think is, like in this whole page we're looking at, it seems like he's taking a hammer to the concept of the separative lower mind. At the very top,
Yeah.
we have Brahma doing Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma things in those first few paragraphs. And then at the bottom, he says that Brahma manifests will and love, etc., etc. So, and then underscores, however, that he's still Brahma, you know?
Yeah.
So it forces the mind out of categories and
Yeah.
limited understanding. And I don't know if that's what makes this statement worthy of consideration, or that's just my puny mind, but it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, of course, the occult statement worthy of consideration is all this idea of as you just said, the intermixture of these aspects, right? Brahma manifesting as will and manifesting as love. And it just, for me, I always go to the idea of a subray when I think of this type of thing, So we can look at this as the third aspect or third ray with a first ray, subray in one consideration and a second subray in another. But within that, it's always completely governed, or within the realm of, the third aspect.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to look at it. And since everything is functioning under these laws of economy, attraction, and synthesis, it depends on which law we use to look at something, okay? So that some of this is Brahma acting almost as synthesis, and some of it is economy. So again, the mind doesn't want to do that. It just wants to lock in certain rigidities. But I found this a very powerful page.
Yeah, I was drawn to it too, this whole concept that he brings forth here. He doesn't spend that much time on it. In fact, that's it, what we've read so far. But I think it really helps condition one's understanding about these three logoi, and how they're essentially interblended.
I like what you said about the subrays. Something can be a Brahma aspect with a sub action of Shiva.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. It's just less mathematical. And why he doesn't say much about it is he's told us to consider it. So it's nice that we can do that here in a group.
Right. So, for instance, this Brahmic with this first subray, the will to be, and as I was just pointing out, as it demonstrates on the Atmic plane, right? This is the will aspect of the spiritual triad, and yet it's third logoic. This is where the will to be really takes form, right? You could say that this is the plane that initiates manifestation. I can't, I used to have these memorized, but no longer. The second stanza of Zahn in TCF describes this process as they first was the third subplane, and that linked it to its primary, which is the divine will aspect, right? And then they go down from there. So, yeah, these are they're not fuzzy abstractions. They really do have their application, right? In other words, these sub qualities of each logoi.
And when you went back to the diagram, one day, hopefully we will see those diagrams as they really are, not just these flat linear renderings, like you were saying earlier, in terms of dimensional on the time, because and what he's doing here with the language is he's saying, look, this is not just this, it's also this. So the kind of multi-dimensional, connections are being hinted at.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's, this is really, wheel turning on itself kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And therefore, in our flatlander level of lower mind consciousness, it's, pretty much impossible to conceive, even though the effort to conceive it or visualize it draws on the intuition. You know, that's probably its main value. Yeah, okay. So next up, second logos. Can we get a reader, please?
Maria Christina.
The second logos. The second logos, Vishnu, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The second logos, Vishnu, the divine wisdom ray, the great principle of Buddhi, seeking to blend with the principle of intelligence, is characterized by love. His motion is that which we might term spiral cyclic. Availing himself of the rotary motion of all atoms, he adds to that his own form of motion, or of spiraling periodical movement. And by circulation along an orbit or spheroidal path, which circles around a central focal point in an ever ascending spiral, two results are brought about. A, he gathers the atoms into forms. B, by means of these forms, he gains the needed contact and develops full consciousness on the 5 planes of human development, gradually rarefying and refining the forms as a spirit of love, where the flame divine spirals ever onward towards its goal, that goal which is also the source from which it came.
Thank you, Maria Christina.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. I second your wow. Okay, so first up, the second logos. The second logos, Vishnu, the divine wisdom ray, the great principle of Buddhi, seeking to blend with the principle of intelligence, is characterized by love. The principle of Buddhi is the esoteric cause of what DK calls the cosmic marriage of spirit and matter. Can we get a reader, please?
Miri.
The second aspect, the building or visional aspect, is governed by the law of attraction. The activities of the entities who embody this aspect are directed to the attracting of matter to spirit and the gradual approximation of the two poles. It results in cohesion, in the production of congeries of atoms in various formations, and this attraction is brought about by the attractive power of spirit itself. It shows itself in 1, association, 2, form building, 3, adaptation of form to vibration, 4, relative homogeneity of group unity, and 5, cyclic spiraling movement, TFC 215.
Yeah, so you can see we're going to be talking about this for some time. You know, we're in the 140s now. This comment is from page 215. In this division, I just want to make a comment about this painting. A lot of times the Hindu spiritual art to me is somewhat saccharine in color, but this to me, something in the choice of especially the blues in the body of Vishnu, it's almost visionary. I should say it suggests the higher planes of vision. Just my observation. Okay. Next. His motion is that which we might term spiral cyclic. availing himself of rotary motion of all atoms, he adds to that his own form of motion, or of spiraling periodical movement. So just as rotary motion has its source in latent fire, or fire by friction, spiral motion has its source in solar fire, whose counterpart in a human being is the spark of mind on the higher subplanes of the middle plane, which DK tells us, quote, leads to expansion and to his eventual return to the center of his system, the monad. An important point here is that the spiraling periodical movement of the second aspect is added to rotary motion rather than replacing it. There's always that quality of merging to the second aspect. And in this case, the merging with the third aspect is what eventually allows the personality to become one with the soul, to become literally soul infused, right? So it's alignment with this spiralic periodical motion. We'll talk more about that in a minute, the nature of that, of this particular kind of motion. Next, and by circulation along an orbit or spheroidal path, which circles around a central focal point in an ever ascending spiral. This central focal point, which forms a central line through the spiral, invisible central line, marks the direct path of pure spirit, which will be the motion of the coming solar system, the next solar system. It is its orientation towards this invisible central force that distinguishes it from rotary motion, that distinguishes spiralic motion from rotary motion. Superficially, you could say that spiralic motion is a blend of direct motion and rotary motion. But the truth is that its ability, because it comes from solar fire, to orient to that central line of force that lifts it, you could say, off of that platform of pure rotary motion. A little later in the text, DK says, his mode of action is cyclic and spiral, the revolution of the wheel of existence in ordered cycles for a specific purpose. In that, he's telling us something about this cyclic aspect of the cyclic motion. And the progression of these spheres of matter around a fixed center within the solar periphery. And we could literally talk for our rest of our session about this statement, right? This ever-changing, ever-mutating spheres of matter that represent our incarnations when talking about a human being, for instance. Okay, to answer questions, always welcome. Next, two results are brought about. A, he gathers the atoms into forms. We have to remember that forms in and of themselves are not matter, but rather that quality or energy that aggregates and holds matter into a cohesive form. So though the ultimate purpose of the second logos is to engender consciousness, in order to do this, it must build those forms through which consciousness can be developed. It's an important distinction between the matter aspect, pure and simple, and the nature of forms. If you look at the some of the names of the second aspect of divinity, it's names like the form builder or the great. Well, I better not without without knowing for sure, but they're very oriented towards this ability to build the form. Okay, next. By means of these forms, he gains the needed contact, hence the reason for building them, and develops full consciousness on the 5 planes of human development. Forms cohere through the law of attraction, which regulates the connection between the self and the not self, which is ever present in the form of the invisible central axis around which the spiral progresses. Consciousness is developed through response to that central axis and to solar fire, the heat of the second logos. The 5 planes of human development are the 5 lower systemic planes, around the sheath of the true self, Atma Buddhi Manas, and its lower reflection, the lower mental, astral, and physical plane develops. And finally, gradually rarefying and refining the forms as a spirit of love, or the flame divine spirals ever onward towards its goal, that goal which is also the source from which it came. So this is the Alpha Omega, represented in some ways by Aries. Through response to the law of attraction, the indweller gradually merges with the divine flame, right? Responds to that central axis as it spirals ever around it. I'm thinking of Sufi dancers, they're representing that indwelling jiva that is spiraling around that central axis, which is within their consciousness. And as a result, attraction becomes synthesis and solar fire becomes electric fire, which is the source of the original impulse to go into manifestation. Okay, let's have some hands.
Robert.
Maybe Scott should go first.
Okay, Scott.
Whatever. When we study the Fibonacci series and the spirals that are governed by it, we have 2 different spirals. So we have the spiral that is like coiled rope.
Right.
And then you have the one that's ever expanding.
Right.
And growing from within itself. So he makes no distinction here, but when we look at it in terms of the spine, the Pingala and the what's the other one?
The Ida, the Pingala, and the Shushumna, and the Santa Maria.
Right. They're always shown as just the simple spiral. Where is the logarithmic spiral that governs growth in nature, if it's not in these spirals also?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that's an well, it is also an involutional spiral. That is to say, it is the means by which forms are built. You can,
But that's evolution.
But what about evolution, you're saying?
No, I'm saying I think that the logarithmic spirals, the one we see in the Nautilus that you have, etc., is evolutionary. It's expanding. It's building greater forms.
Well, that's using the metaphor of, of expansion, outward expansion as movement towards spirit, which, I think it's valid to see it that way. It's almost as though, if like you take a Nautilus, it's so interesting because, it starts real tight in the center and then it comes out. But then it reaches a point where it just ends, suggesting that a higher stage begins there, a higher or a more numinal form of matter is necessary to take it to the next levels. It's a little bit described by that that illustration that I showed with the circles of the spheres of matter, in that spiral.
That was expanding. That was
Yeah,
not,
definitely expanding. I think let's see, it's actually worth bringing up. It's here, 57. That's where we are now. So we'll go back to,
that was 53, perhaps.
oh, you saw it?
One I saw.
Hey, good for you. Thank you. Okay. It's just right there. Okay, so I'll come back. Okay, yeah. Right. So this is a very extended type of attenuated spiral. You can see that's not and it's also seems to be a series of spirals interleaved, not just one. But it's still, you could, we can't say for sure that this particular illustration is covered by Fibonacci, but we know that is the governing law of manifestation. And of course, you have both poles of that, don't you? Like, describe, for instance, that aspect of Fibonacci where you have the 1, then you have the semicolon, and then you have another 1 before it moves to the 2.
There's the unmanifested, then there's the manifested, and then it becomes 2 and 3 and the 10,000.
Yeah. Right. So it suggests that, the spiral goes in both directions. The question is, within the metaphor, is it the tight end, like buried down in here somewhere, that represents spirit? Or is it the expanded end? I think it just depends. What? Go ahead.
I think it has to be the expanded end. I mean, this is
Okay.
it's spiraling out and creating a universe that's getting larger and larger. It's creating forms, not going in. Well, it may go back into one, but in this, in our diagram here, we're getting larger and larger. I think it would seem to be
like in line with an expansion of consciousness. Yeah, in terms of that.
Of forms too, into
right
what we see, the largest.
Yeah, I think it can be used in either direction. And since we're now on an evolutional cycle, that it's appropriate to see it as an evolutional spiraling out into greater consciousness. I think it could also, if you turn it over and point it downward, it's like the Aries symbol, if you turn that over and point it downward, then it can represent that impulse into the material form to manifest, from unity to diversity. I think this could also be used as a symbol for that. Could be used in either way. Thanks, Scott. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? I think we're here.
I've got some. I think what's really interesting here is the process of the way this description of the working is that there are these separated atoms that are almost magnetically drawn into forms, or whatever the nature of the process is.
Law of attraction.
Yeah, on the way to the ultimate, which is, as far as our minds can see, a spheroidal form, which is why, like earlier, you were talking about everything, these planes and the solar system, they're all globes, okay? Yeah. And the globe is the most perfect thing we can imagine in 3 dimensions. And which is, kind of fascinating. I never thought about that before, that all forms that are not globular which would be, for example, the physical appearance of, in forms that are internally globes, like our own bodies. They're all working toward this kind of globe or perfect sphere of creation. And like what you showed before, just with all those small spheres rushing along, everything is it's just a process. It's all magnetic. It's impossible to kind of photograph it or figure it like that. Yeah, and who's to say the other end is not more expanded than this? We can't see these things. We're kind of trending toward, like, James Clerk Maxwell, who scientifically is considered the father of electromagnetism. He said that there are some problems in 3 dimensions that cannot be solved without recourse to the 4th. And for some whatever reason, whether it's the nature of the material, but so much of that is coming up today in the things that we're talking about, and even the pictures we're looking at. That I agree with you. There was something very interesting about that Hindu picture, a lot of which are kind of coarse and,
Yeah.
And even the serpents behind the head were 5, where usually you see different numbers. So, and then we're talking about the 5 planes of human experience. There was a lot of knowledge in that picture, more than usual.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, like I said, we really could spend. You took me at my word that we could spend the rest of the time on this picture, because it is fascinating. Just, our understanding of the world allows us to most easily comprehend the 3rd aspect. Soon as we move into this quality of the 2nd aspect, then the outer symbols that we have, the outer language and forms and ways of describing things, automatically becomes metaphoric for another level of understanding, which we can't directly talk about. We can only point towards it through symbolism. That's why people love poetry and symbolic drawings, etc. Right? Okay, anyone else? Saw more hands.
Yeah, Joe.
I'm going to build a little bit first by commenting that I found it really interesting that while we are cautioned again and again about Kundalini, still DK gave us a short chapter on Kundalini and our own physical selves, if you will, before we go into this portion, which will be much longer. I think he's telling us something. It's like the Kundalini section is a necessary education for us before we can really deal with this material that we're now embarking on.
Yeah, good point.
Next step in that thought process is that we know that there are 5 levels of mentation, and we also know that there are triangles applied to our etheric physical body, so that each represents a different element of our consciousness. I'm finally leading to the point where I believe the 5th level, I will project this as a thesis, is the center, is the heart, is Shiva, and is the Sutratma connecting to our own hearts, life and matter.
Yeah, I like that. In a lot of ways, you can look at the Kundalini as an extended function of the Sutratma. You know, you could say in some ways it's the Sutratma unveiled. You know, it's when the Sutratma truly consciously links you, you know, to that source, which is inherent in the Sutratma, right? It links to the monad, it links to the soul.
For me, it also fits with that picture that we're just looking at, where everything
Everybody loves this
circles.
picture. Here it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? Yeah, because it shows, you know, the nature of the separated self, you know, as these little spheres, as being influenced by the nature of this energy, which is represented by the configuration of those spheres in a spiral. So it works. Who knows if this person had any clue of that, but who, you know, if the artist did, but it's certainly evocative.
It's also, I thought, that beautiful picture that you pointed out, the color, it also is evocative of the concept that I've just shared.
Yeah, I agree.
That snake with its 5 heads above the whole picture.
Yes, indeed. And, you know, we're going to be talking more about serpents. And we'll want to keep that that illustration, that art piece in mind when we do talk about that. Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I don't know if Scott just left his hand up or if he wanted to say something more.
Yes, you got something more, Scott?
No, I didn't have any more
Okay.
at the moment.
Okay, let's take a look at MDR's thoughts on point B here, which we've been discussing for the last while about this, the spiraling ever onward through the spirit of love. Can we get a reader? So, by the way I do this, or I've kind of just started adopting this, this is what's being referenced. This is what he's commenting on. I put it in a slightly grayed color so that, you know, you don't read it. So, but it's there in case you need to know what he's talking about. So can we get a reader for this, please?
Yeah, Lisa, want to read?
Yeah, can I just say to begin with, I'm still in Joe, in her, where she was talking, it kind of threw me back to when Dwayne Carpenter had been making a presentation at the conference, and it was there was a torus.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the planes, and he said, of course, they're all you know, at the same time. He said there's not just one layer. You have to imagine there's as many layers. And then he's going like, you know, step into it. And it was like stepping into it. It was like what you're talking about with the spiraling and moving forward and down through. It was like the Antakarana almost. And it was very, I don't know what it was.
Yeah,
Anyway.
if you get a chance, you know, Google Dwayne Carpenter and his the video of his torus in motion. We're not talking about a Ford driving down the street. We're talking about the we're talking about this three-dimensional object, which is the torus, that really does turn on itself in this really fascinating way. And just watching it, it's a closed loop, so you can just observe it. It's very evocative. That's what Dwayne Carpenter does so well, as he uses these symbolic images. Thank you.
No.
Hey, reader, please. Or you were going to read, aren't you? Yeah.
Yes. Life evolves through the impartation of vibratory quality from one unit of life to another. Each unit has something to share and to receive. Form holds the relationship between units of life steady. This steadiness is necessary so that the contact between such units may be sufficiently prolonged to result in the necessary impartation of quality from one unit of life to another. Without form, chaos would result. Chaos is a condition in which purposeful and sustained relationship does not exist. In a chaotic condition, quality cannot be imparted from one unit to another. We note the names used. The spirit of love is the flame divine. Love refines and rarefies.
We're having a little audio problem with you. Are you still there?
I don't think it's me.
Oh, is somebody unmuted that shouldn't be? There, sounds like we got it. Keep going.
Why does the spirit of love refine forms? Shall we say because the spirit of love brings all to right relationship? Through such relationship, energy may flow in the most constructive and cleansing manner. A refined form is a form which reflects its archetype, and the spirit of love arranges all forms into patterns reflective of archetypal relationships. We must think of the literal and the psychological meaning of spiral ascent. Any form participating in such a spiral moves ever closer to its intended archetypal configurations.
Thank you. So, this idea that the influence of the second aspect, he calls here the spirit of love, arranges all forms into patterns reflective, or you could say, more and more reflective, right? And so there's a progression of those forms becoming more reflective of the archetypal relationship between the units that make up the form. It's really some beautiful stuff in this commentary. Okay. Next up, could we get a reader, please? Mikhail, are you there?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
next is Robert.
These forms are the sum total of all spheres or atoms within the solar system, or within the solar ring past knot. And in their 7 major differentiations, they are the spheres of the 7 spirits, or the 7 planetary logoi. All lesser spheres ranging downward from these major spheres include all grades of manifestation down to the elemental essence on the arc of involution. We need to remember that on the path of involution, the action of Brahma is primarily felt seeking the line of least resistance. Did you want to deal with the that note 64?
We'll go back. We'll go back.
Oh, okay. We need to remember that on the path of involution, the action of Brahma is primarily felt, seeking the line of least resistance. On the path of evolution, the work of the second logos is felt, beginning at a point in time and space which hides the mystery of the second chain, but finding its point of accelerated vibration or the unification of the 2 modes of manifestation, rotary, spiral, cyclic, in the middle part of what we call the third chain. This is, after all, the blending of the activity of Brahma with the onward progress of Vishnu. We have the correspondence to this. Whoops, his note is blocking it here. We have the correspondence to this in the subtotal of the effects brought about in the second and third root races.
Thanks, Robert. Okay, first up, these forms are the sum total of all spheres or atoms within the solar system. There's nothing outside of a congery of forms, or within the solar ring pass knot, and in their 7 major differentiations, they are the spheres of the 7 spirits, or the 7 planetary loci. So by means of the second aspect, the form world, which is an aggregate of all the atoms in the solar system, is itself divided into 7 major differentiations, determined by the spheres or form aspect of the 7 planetary loci. The spheres referred to are not the literal planets, they are certainly governed by these spheres, but rather spheres of ray influence on the form world. DK gives us further insight in esoteric healing. Could we get a reader, please?
Scott, do you want to read?
Okay, I can barely hear you saying that. All right, it will be apparent to you that these streams of force emanating from the lords of the 7 rays are colored, therefore, and tainted, if I may use such a word, by limitations of these same great beings. They are gods from our point of view, but in reality, gods in the making, even though much nearer solar divinity than the most advanced human being is near to the planetary divinity. They are the imperfect gods spoken of in the secret doctrine, and are the planetary loci of the sacred and non-sacred planets. If the great informing lives of the planets within our solar system are imperfect, the effect of this imperfection must inevitably affect their planetary creations, their bodies of manifestation, and thus introduce a karmic condition over which the individual human being has absolutely no control, but within which he moves and which he shares.
Thanks, Scott. So you can see that these are the 7 spheres of ray influence on the form world, right? That are, they're governed by the 7 planetary loci because they are the ray lords. But to the extent, and my guess is that the nature of their spiritual status, whether they're sacred or non-sacred planets, for instance, would very much govern the quality of this ray sphere of influence that affects the substance aspect, right? So, for instance, the Earth is a 3rd ray planet, at least on a personality aspect. Since it's non-sacred, that's the aspect we take to describe planet, is certainly going to be more imperfect in its influence, and therefore will affect all planetary manifestations. So that makes it the cause, for instance, of diseases and other inherent imperfections in matter. Does this make sense? Okay. So next up, how are we doing here? Yeah. All lesser spheres ranging downward from these major spheres include all grades of manifestation down to the elemental essence on the arc of involution. Okay. All grades of manifestation suggest the grades of matter of the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. Let's take a look at the footnote referenced by the term the elemental essence on the arc of involution. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Yeah.
Elemental essence is seen to consist of aggregations of matter on one of the 6 non-atomic subplanes of the mental and the desire planes, aggregations which do not themselves serve as forms for any entity to inhabit, but as the material out of which such forms may be built.
Okay, so DK is referring to the 3 involutional elemental kingdoms shown here, which we discussed at some length last Sunday during our Secret Doctrine webinar. We're just happened to be having a overlap here between the 2 series, at which time we introduced this chart from 5 Years of Theosophy, which shows the descent of these 3 elemental kingdoms into matter. The descent is shown here by this moving towards a central point. These elementals form the 7th creative hierarchy, the so-called elemental lives, called also the basket of nourishment, the blinded lives, and the lesser builders. These little lives are used by the greater builders of the 6th creative hierarchy to create the congeries of form that make up the 4 kingdoms in nature, as shown on the right side of this chart. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, so next, we need to remember that on the path of evolution, the action of Brahma is primarily felt, seeking the line of least resistance. In this chart, great chart from page 94 of TCF. And we looked at it at some length when we were at that page in TCF, I think 2 or 3 webinars. We took a look at it. So in this chart, the path of involution is called the first wave, shown here, the evolution of matter, which impulses from Brahma, the 3rd logos, represented by the circle with a cross at the top of the chart, also a symbol for Earth. This is in contrast to the 2nd wave, impulsing from the 2nd logos, here called the evolution of form, which carries the indweller up to the 4th subplane of the mental plane, where it becomes necessary to invoke the monad or spirit aspect to bridge the arupa levels of the mental plane. It is this 2nd wave that builds the consciousness aspect. Next, on the path of evolution, the work of the 2nd logos is felt, beginning at a point in time and space which hides the mystery of the 2nd chain. So, you're going along just fine and suddenly you're not in Kansas anymore, right? Here's a chart from TCF showing the 2nd and 4th chains. In the detail on the right, we see the lines of connection emanating from the 6th globe of that chain to both the 2nd or Venus globe of our chain, as well as to our 4th or Earth globe. There are only a few comments on the 2nd chain in the blue books to draw from. And this is where we're going to stop. We'll go back to where we turned the corner here and pick up at this point next time.